And that leads us to out of our meeting and into maybe something certainly a lot more interesting. I've listened to Kim before, and I'm looking forward to this. So again, a big shout out to Rock River Labs and Lancaster DHI for sponsoring Kim Bremmer. She will now give her presentation. I'm going to let Cliff Ocker, Rock River there, kind of introduce Kim.
Thank you, Dane, and good job on running the meeting there. So Kim Bremmer. Kim Bremmer is a mother of two, a graduate of UW-Madison, and was a dairy nutritionist for almost 15 years. She is the owner of Ag Inspirations, LLC, where she has been advocating for farmers as a professional speaker since 2015, traveling across the country as well as internationally. Kim is the executive director of Venture Dairy Cooperative and is a registered lobbyist in Wisconsin. She is the president of Wisconsin Women for Agriculture, an affiliate of American Agri-Women, a regular contributor on Royal Route Radio, and serves on the Executive Advisory Council for the American Dairy Coalition. Kim is on the board of directors for her county farm bureau and loves being a Quiz Bowl coach for her Clark County Junior Holstein Association. She is a vocal champion of agriculture everywhere she goes, from the grocery store to the airport. With that, Kim, we'll turn it over to you, and we look forward to your presentation.
All right. Well, thank you, Cliff. I think I need...
Yeah, I need to stop sharing, I think. There we go.
There you go. I'll pull mine up and get started. Well, thanks again for the opportunity to present to you during your lunch today. What we're going to talk about is leading the discussion in agriculture. Let's see if we can make this work. There we go. So we're on this dangerous path that devalues science and overvalues opinion. You don't have to look very far in any news story today to get this. And I always talk all the time about the talk versus the truth about agriculture. If I had a quarter for every time I've heard, don't eat something you can't pronounce, chemicals are bad, we live in this time of chemophobia. And I always like giving people a different perspective or a different way to look at it. And I have presented at a lot of dietitian association meetings in a number of states. This always comes up. That this is the advice that we're going to give to our clients is don't eat anything you can't pronounce. And I say, well, that's okay, except it's probably not the best way to look at it, because if that were true, we shouldn't eat a banana. There's plenty of people who couldn't pronounce the ingredients that are in a banana. And what do we all know about chemicals? That chemicals aren't bad. Everything's made up of chemicals, whether they're man-made or synthetic doesn't mean anything about their safety. And frankly, if you can pronounce or spell something, that doesn't really mean a whole lot. But the story that people hear about agriculture gets thrown at them from a number of different places every single day. And it really isn't their fault that people don't understand agriculture. I put this on here. So I have a 17-year-old daughter. She communicates with me via Snapchat. That's her preferred method. And she subscribes to the Dodo. Now, the Dodo is a channel on Snapchat. It's got over 3.5 million users a day. This was a story she took a picture of for me. She said, hey, Mom, check it out. Instant BFFs. Calvin and Zoe are baby calves, both rescued from the dairy industry. Calvin had never seen another cow before, so this was the first time he met someone just like him, rescued from the dairy industry. Now, we can all look at this and say, well, this is a little ridiculous, but 3.5 million people saw it that day. And is it really their fault that they don't understand agriculture? The news media certainly doesn't do us any favors. This was a story that was printed in the Wall Street Journal about my state. I'm coming to you from the middle of Wisconsin. I live in Clark County, Wisconsin, where there are 66,000 dairy cows and 32,000 people in my entire county, and one stoplight that arguably doesn't need to be there. And this was written about people that I know, farms that I've been on, farms that I've worked with. And it was a 16-page spread in the Wall Street Journal. And how many people did it reach? Dr. Oz, just because he says there's fish genes in tomatoes doesn't mean it's true. But the messages about agriculture are told every single day from any sort of media platform that one can imagine. I put at the bottom a couple of logos. Food companies are a great example as well. Culver's is in the Midwest, my beloved Culver's. And there was a meeting that PDPW, Professional Dairy Producers of Wisconsin, hosted a few years ago. And one of the main speakers was the CEO at the time of Culver's. And there were hundreds of dairy producers in the room, and one raised their hand and said, "When are you going to put my farm in your commercial? Because I have a freestall barn, but we don't ever see freestall barns in commercials." And he kind of chuckled and said, "Well, your image isn't my problem." And the whole room gasped. Yet, should we be mad at Craig Culver? Because he's not wrong. Our image really isn't his problem, and it's not his responsibility to put it in his commercials. Activists certainly play a role in framing the story. The picture on the right, so my state has had 3 animal abuse videos that have been released. This was one of them. I've been on this farm, Wittenberg, Wisconsin. The point of the story that I wanted to make, however, was this employee was dealt with, but it was aired a year later on my television station as though it was new news. Now, I knew it was the same video, but how many people watching it knew it was the same video? Or how many people thought, "Oh, well, of course, here we go. It's a large farm. We know cows aren't treated very well." I put the picture of the Fairlife bottles on here. They had their own instances in the past year. And activists play a role in telling the story of agriculture. This is Vandana Shiva. She was the lead speaker during Earth Week at UW Oshkosh, part of my UW system. She will stand at the podium and slap the podium and talk about modern agriculture, how we're killing Mother Earth. I took my daughter with me, and we sat in the room. And about 5 minutes into Vandana's speech, my daughter was elbowing me, and she said, "Mom, why does it look like everyone believes her?" And I said, "Because they do, because they've never been to a farm. They don't know anything about agriculture." She tells a great story. She, by the way, comes with a price tag of about $20,000 plus first-class airfare from India. Where's Cliff? We're going to have to talk about my speaker honorarium. But $20,000 to speak for Earth Week, and she's an activist. And labels. It is no wonder, if you pay attention to labels at the grocery store, it's no wonder people are confused or have different ideas about the real story of agriculture. This is a beautiful label from Organic Valley. And I want to be really clear about something. I'm not against organic farming. I'm proud that Organic Valley is headquartered in my state. I took this picture in my grocery store because it is beautiful. The woman ahead of me was checking out. She had a beautiful cart full of groceries, fresh fruits and vegetables. And I had never gotten that close to this label. And if you look at it and you're just a mom at the grocery store and you're trying to buy the best possible thing for your family, you should pay $7.99 a gallon for this. It's beautiful. We give our animals the greenest pastures. They give you delicious, nutritious milk. They're pasture raised with love from our family to yours, always handled with care. 57 quality checks. You wouldn't put them on your table. We never use antibiotics, synthetic hormones, toxic pesticides, or GMOs. If you don't know anything about agriculture, you should pay $7.99 a gallon for that milk. It's beautiful. And remember, I took this picture at my little grocery store. The high school girl who was scanning this woman's groceries looked at her and said, "Wow, this organic food is really expensive. Do you think it's worth it?" Now, 2 things happened in that moment. One, I also had my daughter with me that day, because I should back up on the story. In my house, when you're in trouble, you get to go to the grocery store with mom, because I never leave the grocery store without talking to people. Even today, even with a mask on. And when the grocery store, when the high school girl who was scanning the groceries said to the woman, "Do you think it's worth it?" 2 things happened. One, I saw my daughter's hair flick out of the corner of my eye, like, "Oh no, you did not just say that in front of my mom. We were almost out of here." But the second thing, without missing a beat, this woman looked at the high school girl and said, "Absolutely. My husband and I, we don't have a 401k. We don't have any retirement investments, because what we believe in is serving healthy food to our family today." And that was in my backyard. Remember where I live. There's 66,000 dairy cows, 32,000 people. I'm in a rural agricultural based area. Now, I didn't say anything to this woman. Her kids were all bundled up. It was time to go, but I took the time with the grocery store, the employee, and I said, hey, that was an interesting discussion that I heard you having. I wish I could take that woman to some farms so she could see that there's nothing wrong or scary about regular conventionally raised food too, that organic is a marketing label through USDA. USDA is very clear about that. But the message of agriculture gets told every day by a lot of different places and by a lot of different people. And then I took this, last time I was in Vermont, back in the traveling days, I took a picture of this at a grocery store. I'd never seen it before, the Dreaming Cow brand. We don't have this brand in Wisconsin anywhere, but grass-fed, 100% pasture-raised, barn-free cows. I had never seen that before. If you look up the Dreamy Cow brand, we believe in letting cows be cows. That means unconfined, grass-fed bliss, 365 days a year, no barns, no stress, no added hormones. And what's the message that people got? So at the end of the day, our competition is tough. This is no surprise to any of us in agriculture, but we have to think about it from a consumer perspective. So where's the voice of the farmer and rancher in this conversation? And what role do we play? As allied industry, as suppliers to farmers, the entire responsibility of this messaging does not lie on the shoulders of farmers alone. Remember, they're only 1% of the population. They're outnumbered 99 to 1. This is a value we add to our farmers, to our customers, to the industry that we love and support. And this is one of my favorite quotes from Daniel Kahneman, that a reliable way to make people believe in falsehoods is frequent repetition, because familiarity is not easily distinguished from the truth. And how true is that? When people hear things enough times, it becomes the truth. They can't always explain why they believe it, but they know that they've heard it enough times. And this is the intersection that we sit at in our messaging of agriculture. So we have to do better. The art of communication is the language of leadership, and each and every one of us can do better in this arena. Our message that matters is our message of continual improvements, that we're always improving the care for the land, our care for animals, and we're always improving to conserve resources. Sometimes we make this far too complicated, especially when the success of agriculture has long been built on innovation and science and technology. But that isn't always the most connecting message with everyday consumers. If you ever get a chance, watch Simon Sinek on YouTube. He's one of my favorite speakers in the world. He does business consulting for large companies like Apple and Microsoft, and he talks all the time about value. That value is a perception, not a calculation. Value is something people feel. It's not something we tell them they get. Using the dairy industry is a great example. We've marketed milk for decades by saying what to people? Well, drink milk, it's good for you. Duh. That may be true. We're not wrong. It is good for you. You should drink milk. But did that sell you the value of our industry at all? Not really. Did it connect with consumers? Not really. Does it sell the value of our farmers? Not at all. We have to always be shaping the story. It's the story that's most important when we're connecting with consumers. Communicating with ease. This is my favorite acronym to use. This is my crash course in communication. I'm always working on improving this too. I work with a lot of farmers on their communication techniques, and we talk all the time about ease and this acronym. The first part of it is engage, to engage in a conversation. Look for a connection, start a conversation. My grandma always told me you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them accordingly. And it is true. Too often, we're very quick to correct people, especially in terms of conversations about agriculture. When we know something's wrong, what do? We get instantly offended, we correct them, we puke our knowledge all over them. We have to stop puking on people. It's not working. So engaging in conversations, listening, not to just respond, but listening to actually listen. But the most important part of this acronym is the A, acknowledge. We have to acknowledge that all consumer concerns are valid, whether we agree with them or not. And that's difficult to do sometimes. But there are little easy things that you can do if you memorize these. I understand why you're concerned about that. There's tons of misinformation out there, but on farms, we actually do this. Or that's a great question. I've actually seen this. Or I'm glad you asked that. It causes a break in the conversation, a brief pause, and it makes people feel heard. And ultimately, that's all any of us wants anyway, is to feel acknowledged, to feel heard. This is about connecting with people so that our voices are included in the story of agriculture. We can't make the media go away, food company advertising, all the things that we started out this talk with. We just want to make sure that we're a resource. So when people have questions, that they're asking us too, and at least the voice of agriculture is included in the conversation. If I had a quarter for every time I've said these things, I understand why you're concerned about that. There's tons of misinformation out there. The next part of this acronym, the S, is to share. Now we share. Now we talk about our perspective from our side of the fence, so to speak, only after we've engaged in a conversation and acknowledged people's concerns. A couple of recent examples. So I put these pictures up. I don't know if any of you saw the story on social media with Michelle Miller, the farm babe. We end up doing presentations at a number of meetings together. And Burger King came out with an advertisement that went viral that was talking all about, it showed kids in hazmat suits. It was a cartoon. It was a spoof on farmers. Farmers got really offended by it and pretty much let Burger King know that they weren't happy with their ad campaign. Many organizations and groups sent emails to Burger King, but Michelle Miller, if any of you follow her, she can be relentless on social media and sometimes even abrasive. And there is no one way, one size fits all way to advocate for agriculture. Everyone has their own style, and they responded to her. It did work. And you'll see in the pictures, I don't think I can access my pointer right now, but one of the gentlemen, Fernando Machado, he's their chief marketing officer from Burger King. He flew in from Miami. Gustavo Lora is the co-founder of the New York City-based ad agency that they worked with. It's called We Believers. He's in the pictures. I went down to help her. We took them to 3 farms. We had a great day of discussions, of talking about sustainability on farms, why farmers were so offended by their ad. We had a great call on the back of the skid steer, you can kind of see that there's an iPad sitting up. We had Dan Thompson, he's an animal science professor from Iowa State. We Skyped him in and talked all about different things about sustainability pertaining to modern agriculture. And it was a great day. And it was just a time to have discussions, acknowledge what they were thinking. They didn't understand anything at all of how they could have offended farms until after our day. And they now have a new sustainability ad that they'll be releasing. So sometimes, actually, I shouldn't say sometimes, most of the time, it really, there's not a lot of things that happen like this that are meant in a really malicious way. It's just people have never been exposed to agriculture, and we take that for granted because it's our livelihood. And then I had to put this picture in here. The CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, is a really big deal. It's in Las Vegas every year. It's a huge global stage for tech innovation. There's 200,000 people attend it. John Deere is one of the first agricultural companies to attend the CES show. They took, obviously, you can see a combine. They were showcasing precision agriculture, new equipment. I have a lot of old college friends that work for John Deere. They called me the first night and said, "You've got to come to this show with us next year because you wouldn't believe it. The line to get into this combine was long all day long. Never went down. They lost their voices. They never had a break. The venue was closing. They had to kick people out. And do you know what the 2 questions were that got asked most frequently over the course of the Consumer Electronics Show? Keep in mind, these are the experts from around the world in technology and innovation. 2 most common questions. Number 1, is this for Earth? And number 2 was, when will this be for sale? So it was just a great example to showcase that the smartest of the smart people in technology were not aware of a combine and the technology available to farms today. So it was a great opportunity to connect outside of the circle of agriculture. Anytime we're framing the story, we know also that the 4 most important things outside of animal welfare to everyday consumers, according to, doesn't matter who does the consumer research, are issues concerning water, air, soil, habitat. And I guarantee that if anyone is farming today and in business, they've made significant improvements in all of these areas on their farms. It's just about how we help share the story. The words we choose, we all speak farmer, not everyone speaks farmer. This became apparent to me. I'll never forget, I was at the airport in Minneapolis, and I was talking to a woman about how I'd spent 15 years as a nutritionist for cows, and cows eat better than people, and we custom balance these TMRs for them every single day. And she finally looked at me 5 minutes into the conversation and said, so is a TMR like, is that a shot you give them or something? And I thought, oh, good lesson. How in the world would she know what a TMR is? But we just take that for granted. So it's important to always be remembering words that we use and how they shape perception. I'll give you some examples that I use all the time. When I'm talking about pesticides, I'm not saying don't use the words, but I take a second and explain them. Pesticides, it's things that we use to prevent bugs or weeds or fungi from eating and stealing nutrients from our crops. When I'm talking about fertilizers and nitrogen, it's all about how we nurture plants at the right time, the right rate, so our crops grow and they thrive. When I give farm tours and we walk through hutches, I call it the nursery. TMR is a balanced cow casserole, because everyone understands that. When we talk about activity monitors, it's Fitbits for cows, because that's a relatable term. And then better yet, I explain why we would have them. Yes, we monitor a cow's steps every 15 minutes. A wireless signal goes to the computer and tracks her steps and compares it to the average over the last 10 days and sends a message, a signal to my cell phone. If her steps are up or down, plus or minus 10%. Why is that important? Well, if her steps go down, I know to go take a look at her, because I know a cow's steps will go down about 12 hours before she gets a fever. So I'm going to go look at her and see, do her eyes look bright? Does her belly look full? Does her hair look nice? Is she just lazy today, or does she not feel well? If her steps go up, I go check the calendar. She might get a date night tonight. And everyone understands that. When I'm talking about productivity on farms, it's always about improvements, and GMOs, a precise plant breeding technique. So words shape perception. And the last part of this acronym is E, to earn trust. The lady at the bottom of the screen, she's not that scary. I meet her all the time. She just is passionate about what she believes, what she has seen, and what she has heard enough times. Because especially in agriculture, I give a lot of companies a hard time when I get the chance to work with them about messaging, because one of the most important things I ever learned from Paul Shapiro and Wayne Pacelli, those are people who were top executives at the Humane Society of the United States. I've attended their conferences, as painful as it may be. And one of the things that I've learned from them over time is they talk all the time about progress over perfection. Progress over perfection. And it's this mantra of continually repeating messages. And what do we do in agriculture? We do it the opposite. We're very concerned about perfection over progress. Think about it. We don't put press releases out, memes out. We don't release anything until it's been approved by 57 people. It's the exact font that everyone wants. And it goes through all these layers. And it doesn't matter what company you are. but everyone does it until the message is what? Late. It's usually late. And we also assume that when we tell people something once or twice that they got it, they understood it, and then we're on to the next thing. And that's what the other side always beats us on, is this constant repetition of their information. So this lady, she's not that scary. She just hasn't heard from any of us very, very often. The real story of agriculture, and one of our greatest things that we truly don't talk enough about, is how we continue to produce more using fewer resources. And I anticipate this discussion to continue to improve, especially as we're hearing more about climate change, climate justice, carbon, the whole net carbon initiative coming from the dairy industry, that the saving of resources really is a big part of our story, because we continue to produce more using less. And it's one of our greatest successes that we've had. And all facets of agriculture have a very similar success story to show. When my grandpa was a kid, so we're talking in the 20s, it took 5 acres of land to feed a person. Today, we're feeding people on less than 1/3 of an acre. And that's only going to continue to improve. And that's not because my grandpa was a bad farmer. It's because it's what agriculture does. We're always improving what we're doing. We grow twice as much corn per acre as our parents did, 5 times as much as our grandparents did. And that's only going to continue to improve. Every species has the same success story to share. In 1940, one sow weaned 2 litters per year, 6 piglets per litter. So one sow in the 40s weaned 12 piglets per year. At the annual pork congress in Des Moines, talking to pig farmers there, we're weaning 30, 33 plus piglets per sow per year. Now, if you had told my grandpa that someday we'd be weaning over 30 piglets per sow per year, he would have said, "What? You're crazy. That'll never happen." But here we are. And how'd we do it? It's continual improvements over time. It's continual improvements in genetics, in housing, and how we feed them. Poultry industry, same story. Every day, 278 million of our layers lay an egg. And they do that eating less feed, drinking less water, using less energy than ever before. Beef industry, same story. Look at all of Jude Capper's numbers that have been published in the Journal of Dairy Science, Journal of Animal Science, all about sustainability. The total carbon footprint of every biteful of beef has been reduced by 16.3% since the year I was born. And that wasn't that long ago, 1977. And that's only going to continue to improve. And the dairy industry has the same metrics. Since 1950, we have more than cut the national herd in half. We're down to 9.3 million cows in the US. We've cut the herd in half, but yet we're producing 60% more milk. And why is that a big deal? That uses 90% less land, 78% less feed, 65% less water. And it's only going to continue to improve. We also don't talk a lot about this or enough about this. And this discussion, more of this discussion is coming, especially with the introduction of all of the new, now we have cellular-based proteins, the cellular-based milk protein and meat protein products coming on the market. And I do meet people that will say, well, I don't think that we should eat meat because it uses too many resources. You know how much water it takes to produce a pound of beef? And remember our E's, acknowledging concern. I understand why you'd say that, but if that, really were the case and you don't think any of us should eat meat, where are we going to get all these other things from? All the adhesives that are in Band-Aids, all the adhesives in plywood, we get over 120 life-saving pharmaceuticals from beef. So where are we going to get all of these byproducts from? Not to mention that ruminants, and I don't need to tell this audience this, ruminants and the power of upcycling. Think about all of the waste that we're able to run through our cattle. They take all that fiber and that cellulose that we can't digest and turn it into food we can. So the power of a ruminant is real. And we have to make sure that we're including that in our discussions, especially as the cellular-based protein world continues to grow. 85% of the grazelands are unsuitable for growing crops and food that we could essentially eat. And that's, again, back to the power of our ruminants. These are Farm Bureau's numbers, but today's farmers produce 262% more food with 2% fewer resources than in 1950. And that's a pretty big deal. How did we do it? This one's easy. It's just improvements, genetics, animal welfare, cropping practices. We've come a long way. Now, it's fun when I have to explain the differences in these pictures, when I'm in front of a college course or in front of a dietitian group, because they don't understand why the black and white pictures are not ideal. But think about our improvements in genetics. And now we're looking at genomics. Now we look at health traits. When I was growing up, we didn't look at that. We didn't have any of that to look at. And what will the next round of innovation and advancements in science bring? Poultry. I put this in here just with Thanksgiving coming up. I have this discussion all the time. People will comment about the large birds, must be all the hormones that we're putting in the birds. Well, that's not true. Poultry and pork, it's not allowed in the United States. There are no added hormones allowed in poultry or pork in the United States. Not that hormones are bad, but it's genetics. We've come a long way. And look at our crop genetics. The picture on the left is teosinte corn from 10,000 years ago. That wouldn't be very useful to any of us today. And we're only improving. And just how we've done it, this is where the discussion about transgenesis, GMOs comes in, and now the latest CRISPR. But we've been improving plants for a very long time using a number of different methods. And it's fun to think about where the future of this technology will go. Animal welfare. We also have, if you think about it, made significant improvements in animal welfare. And there is a disconnect with everyday consumers about this. You think back to our yogurt brand that said barn-free cows, less stress. I think we can make a pretty compelling story that we've come a long way in cow comfort and animal welfare. Think about working with dairy farmers, how many have ripped their barns apart to improve them so they adhere to the latest recommendations, stall length, stall width, neck rails up, neck rails down. Now we're always adjusting ventilation. We have cow brushes in barns. I always talk all the time on tours about, cattle get their hooves trimmed. They get a pedicure twice a year. Again, using words that people understand. Improvements in welfare in terms of antibiotics. This discussion seems to circle around. Sometimes it seems that it's more in the forefront than at other times, but still the important points are what? We've made significant improvements in antibiotic usage on farms. When I was a kid growing up and a cow got sick, what did we treat her with? Penicillin, that's all we had. That's all anyone used. We would never do that today. You could go to many farms that may not even have a bottle of penicillin anymore. And why is that? Because farmers are as concerned as anyone about antibiotic and antimicrobial resistance. Plus, we've come up with new antibiotics that are better, that are more effective, combinations that work better. And certainly the feed world has a great story to tell. Animals eat better than people, hands down, every single day. We custom balance diets every day for over 50 different nutrients, right down to specific amino acids, because animals eat better than people. And lastly, cropping practices. As the discussion about climate change and sustainability continues to ramp up, this discussion seems to be growing. And that's good for agriculture because this is an area where farmers have really not been getting credit for the things that they're doing. And this is where our voices are equally as powerful. When you look at farm conservation ag strategies that are significant, and they're also customized and different for every single farm. But we're using more nutrient management plans than ever. No-till, minimum tillage, conservation tillage. We're doing very innovative crop rotations. It always amazes me driving around this time of year. So we're post-harvest. We've had a great fall here. There's a lot of green things growing in fields. So there's good cover for the winter, and things that we never maybe would have imagined seeing just a few years ago. Turnips, different clover blends. We're using more cover crops than ever before, holding soil in place, preserving topsoil. People doing split nitrogen applications to help prevent leaching into groundwater. Buffers, wetlands, low density manure injection, plant genetics obviously have made significant improvements for cropping practices. Precision agriculture. I will say to people all the time, hey, you should come out to the farm, sit in a tractor with me. Well, it's talking to one of the 26 satellites in space, variable rate applying manure where we want it and not where we don't. People have never heard that farmers are doing that, yet this is where we are. Precision agriculture is here. Where is the future of this going? Nutrient trading. I've been working with some farms that have been negotiating phosphorus credits with their local municipalities, because municipalities have discharge permits that they have to adhere to. If they're going to lower the amount of phosphorus that they are responsible for into different TMDLs and watersheds, they're looking at millions, tens of millions of dollars of investment. Whereas they can start smaller, upgrading municipalities, but they can also take credits from local farmers and do a nutrient trade. But it equates to real money for farms. And we will see much more of this. Right now, I only see it happening in phosphorus, but I'm sure that's going to be happening, obviously in carbon. The Net Carbon Initiative. This has been the latest from the National Checkoff. The dairy industry as a whole, they've committed to being net zero by 2050. They're investing money in pilot projects in 5 or 6 regions around the US. So this is something to watch. And license to farm. I put this on here because this is really something for all of us to consider. It is likely that all of these conservation strategies and the things that farms and our farmers are doing, this will be included in your license to farm. But if you're not doing a minimum number of these things, and at some point in someday, your milk won't get picked up for processing. So this discussion will continue to evolve and amplify. And offering different perspective. So often we are more interested when we're talking about agriculture in getting people to think like us. We're always frustrated when people don't understand what we're doing or what we're talking about, or they don't tell the truth, or they spread misinformation. But our job really is not to get this woman to think exactly like us. In fact, in some cases, it's our job to get people just to hate us less. And I hate to say it like that, but it's the truth. Oftentimes we want them to hate us less, hate what we're doing less, and hate a part of agriculture that they don't understand, to hate it less. It's not to get people to think like us. So one good and effective way to do that is just offering different perspective, to give people a little different way to think about it. Meatless Mondays, this initiative is still going on. It's still pushed by HSUS and PETA, and it's for the health of the planet. When really, what is the truth? We know all of the numbers from Dr. Mittliner at UC Davis. He's a world-renowned air quality researcher. US livestock are responsible for 4.2% of greenhouse gas emissions. We know other sectors are responsible for much more. So how can we reach people? I love just sharing little snippets of science, little things and tidbits that they can take away. Because we're talking about very scientific things, and we're trying to boil them down into things that people can understand. So one of the things that I always like to use when and if this discussion comes up is, I'm not saying that the livestock industry is not responsible for greenhouse gas emissions. I acknowledge that. But just to put it in perspective, if everyone in the United States replaced their incandescent light bulbs with Energy Star light bulbs, we would reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 1.2%. If everyone went meatless Mondays, we would reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 0.6%. So we have double the impact if we change our light bulbs. And we also need to be always prepared to talk more about, so people can better understand this stock gas versus flow gas discussion. Because we hear all the time, well, methane is 25 times more toxic than CO2. That's true, except we have to remember that carbon is a stock gas. It's always adding up. It takes tens of thousands, takes tens of thousands of years to be removed. It's there for a really long time. Whereas methane is a flow gas. It has a lifespan of about 10 years. It goes through this cycle. It goes through plants, through our ruminant animals, but it ends up getting recycled. We're not contributing more with our cattle. And why is that? And why is the discussion about methane and greenhouse gas emissions important? Because these people are having it. I don't know if any of you were able to attend IDFA, International Dairy Foods Association meeting this year, at the beginning of the year, end of January in Scottsdale, back in the days pre-COVID. I've always wanted to go. I've never been able to make it work. I went this year. There are 1,250 people there, companies and executives from large companies like Starbucks, Costco, and Nestle, all talking about sustainability, about greenhouse gas emissions, about carbon footprint. And Perfect Day, the brand on the bottom on the right, that's a company out of California, Silicon Valley startup. I have followed them from the beginning. They are part of the cellular-based industry. They make identical milk proteins, growing them, fermenting them in these large vats using bovine serum. Why is that a big deal? Because the CEO from Perfect Day got on the stage talking to all these companies who are very concerned and have to show to their stockholders that they're making a difference for the improvement in the environment. He stands up on the stage and says to all of them, hey, I don't want to replace cow milk, and I don't need to replace all the cows, but I want to be an ingredient on your product because I can make an identical milk protein without the cow. And everyone's eyes are lighting up because they're thinking through, ooh, I can reduce my company's carbon footprint. Because the executive from Costco and Nestle also got on the stage and said, we know that our largest carbon footprint is coming from farms. It's at the farm level. We're certain of that. And here's the solution. So it's important that we're making sure that the truth about carbon footprint is getting out there and the message. GMOs, people are still talking about GMOs, not so sure if they like the technology, not so sure that it's safe. Again, just offering different perspective. I completely understand why people are scared of this technology. There is so much misinformation out there. You know, it's only corn, cotton, canola, alfalfa, sugar beets, papaya, squash, soybeans, the innate potato, the Arctic apple, the brinjal eggplant was recently approved in India. But more importantly, it's how we answer the questions, how we shape the story using words that people will understand. This is a precise plant breeding technique. It only affects 1 to 3 genes, whereas every other way that we improve plants affects tens of thousands of genes. This is precise, 1 to 3. And we also need to be able to talk about the why. Again, shaping the story. It's not about convincing people to like the science. It's helping people understand where this fits in the story. That all farmers' crops have to compete with 10,000 species of weeds, 30,000 species of plant-eating bugs. It's your job as a farmer to protect your crops. Because at the end of the day, don't make it too complicated. Healthy plants make healthy food. I'll have people say, well, I think that they're scary. Yep, I understand why you'd say that. But then what's our little snippet? What can we offer them as a different way to look at it? I understand why you think they're scary, but do you know where the gene comes from that makes things Roundup Ready? That's our largest, most widely adapted GMO that's used around the world, is the Roundup Ready gene in corn, soybeans, alfalfa. Do you know where the gene came from? And most people will say no. The answer is a petunia. And petunias are not scary. All proof of concept for the Roundup Ready gene was done in a petunia. And then it's almost as if it comes to a relief to many people who believe that, because you're right, petunias are not scary. They're not natural. Again, I understand why you'd think that. But that isn't entirely how it works. Genes are not static. Mother Nature moves genes too. We have over 150 genes in our genome that did not come from us because Mother Nature moves genes too. A monarch butterfly has genes in it from a wasp. We didn't do that. Mother Nature moves genes too. A sweet potato hardly has any genes left in it from the quote unquote original sweet potato. We didn't do that because Mother Nature moves genes too. Genes aren't static. Environmental footprint, here we are. This is where we talk about the use of this technology has allowed us to do more no-till farming, where we don't move topsoil, where we don't rip up the topsoil, especially in terms of weed control. Well, every time you move topsoil, you release carbon. Remember, we're trying not to do that. The use of this technology has taken over 65 billion pounds of carbon out of the atmosphere because it has allowed for these conservation techniques to be used in certain fields, in certain areas. That's the same as taking over 15.3 million cars off the road a year because of a technology that farmers have access to. And they're not safe. Yep, again, I understand why you would think that. So there's a ton of misinformation out there, but there's thousands of studies, peer-reviewed, that show that they're safe. They have to show that they're equally as safe as their conventional counterpart. One of the more effective things that people seem responsive to is understanding that they're not just approved in the US. And by the way, it takes about a decade to get that done, but they're also approved by all the agencies in the EU and around the world because of trade. So even though the European Union doesn't allow most GMOs to be planted, that's a political reason more than anything. They do label them for safety. They import them all from us. They feed them to their livestock. They feed them to their people. But different perspective, this technology is not just used in plant breeding. The GMO technology is responsible for current day insulin. We no longer harvest insulin off of a slaughterhouse floor from the pancreases of pigs. We grow it in an agrobacterium in a petri dish in a lab. Cheese, I'm coming to you from Wisconsin. I'm a cheesehead. We wouldn't have any cheese without GMO rennet. Rennet is what separates the curd from the whey. It came from ruminant, an enzyme in a dead calf stomach. We don't do that anymore. We grow rennet in an agrobacterium in a lab. Different perspective, Roundup. I can give an entire talk on Roundup. People have lots of fear and there's a ton of misinformation about it. But at the end of the day, well, the active ingredient in Roundup is glyphosate. And glyphosate is 25 times less toxic than the 60 milligrams of caffeine that's in your cup of coffee. And it's all about the dose that makes the poison. And that is the simple message for us to share. CAFOs, tons of discussions about CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding operations. You get out east where many of you are, and it's animal feeding operations. This right to harm film has gained a lot of traction nationwide, actually featured a lot of farms from Wisconsin. The dairy farms are mostly in Wisconsin, and there's a large poultry farm in Arizona. And it's a really well done film if you don't know anything about agriculture. But what I always like to ask people is, well, where do you think they came from? Because 96% of the farms in the US today are still family owned and operated. They're families that are growing their business to include more family members, their neighbors that decided to farm together. It's a business model to capture efficiencies. And just to get people to think about it in a different perspective. We know that animal welfare is completely farm size neutral, that the size of a farm doesn't have anything to do with quality. And this is a great quote from JFK, that we subject all facts to prefabricated interpretations, that we enjoy the comfort of opinion without the discomfort of thought. And this is our everyday challenge. Back to this story that was in the Wall Street Journal. It did highlight my Kewaunee County. Many of you have probably heard about it. People talk about it all the time, how bad it is there, that the water quality is bad, that there's large farms there, they've ruined it, which if you visit Kewaunee County is really not the truth. And if we look at even the study that this was based on, there's 5 times as many more cows than people in Kiwani. Kiwani is close to my cow numbers. I think there may be 3,000 under. They have 62 or 63,000 cows there on a smaller land base. So if we look at the total waste that's coming out of that county, and this was all highlighted in that paper, there's 210 times the amount of cow manure versus human sewage. Well, that's a lot. And this was all research done by Mark Borchardt. He works for USGS. He looked at 138 samples from 131 wells out of nearly 5,000 private wells in that county. Statistically speaking, it was a 50-50 split. Half of the contaminants came from bovines, half from humans. But what did the story say? The story was agriculture is horrible. It's ruining the water and the environment of where we live. Well, half of the contamination came from bovines, who really have 210 times the amount of fecal waste. So think about that. Yet only half came from cattle. So couldn't we frame that story? Couldn't we say, well, maybe the farms are doing a better job of handling their waste than we are of ours, because they should have 210 times the amount coming from them. So maybe agriculture has more answers. Maybe we hold more of the solutions. And one thing that I always do, because this happens everywhere, these controlled releases of municipalities into waterways, this solution to pollution is dilution. Municipalities have the same permit discharges as our large farms do today. And this came from the Baltimore Sun. Every time I catch one of these articles, I write a letter to the editor in, just reminding them, I do the math, and I remind them how many tankers of manure this would be, just to make sure that people are getting that message in their brains. Because really, it's a fair message. If there's 22.6 million gallons of sewage that overflowed into this waterway, that'd be the same as 3,667 manure tankers. Now, I don't care if you use 6,000 gallon tankers or 8,000 gallon tankers, do the math whichever way you want. But can you imagine if a farm had discharged 3,000 plus tanker loads of manure into a waterway? And it's completely okay. You're allowed, at least in the state of Wisconsin, there are many other states too, you're allowed a certain number of controlled release discharges when you are a municipality. I understand why that is. We can't have sewage backing up into people's homes. But we have to be able to put it in perspective. If a farmer dumped one manure tanker load into a waterway, we'd be on Good Morning America. So it's about making sure that we're offering different perspective. This is a list of my favorite resources, and all of you, by the way, are welcome to this presentation. I'll make sure that the group at ARPAS has it. You can have copies of the slides, but this is a list of my favorite resources. This is my go-to list. If people have questions or things that I can't answer, I will always get back to them. And I'm always moving and changing this list. So if you have a favorite resource that you like to use, please let me know what it is. And I will certainly add it. And lastly, I want to leave you with just some little things that you can do, because it really is up to all of us. When we hear things that are said that aren't true about agriculture, we know that there's a ton of misinformation. It is all of our job. We all have this role and responsibility to speak up and be part of the conversation. So leaving you with an action plan, 168 hours. This is what we all have in a week. Media is hungry for content, give it to them. If you like to write, don't be afraid to write a positive story to a local newspaper about agriculture. If you don't like to write, don't do it. I'm not saying you have to make this a checklist. I'm saying you have to find what works for you. The most important part is that your voice is included in telling the story of agriculture. Schools, there's a lot of curriculum that's in schools today that is put out by groups like HSUS, and schools are always willing to work with local professionals. Certainly if working with your local school interests you, by all means, take the time to do it. If you've not seen Food Evolution, put this on your list. have some friends over, watch it. This is a great film, narrated by Neil deGrasse Tyson. Scott Hamilton Kennedy is a great Academy Award nominee, producer, director from California. I helped them do screenings on campuses across the US when this came out last year, but now you can access it. It's a great film. On farm events, if we ever get back there, certainly help farms put them on anytime you can, because anytime you can have the opportunity to connect with people at a farm so they can see things themselves, it's invaluable. Staying involved with policy, knowing what's going on, helping groups that are working on policy is more important than ever. Policymakers don't always hear from people in agriculture, so they're always willing to listen and learn. And as far as policy is concerned, also knowing your local level of government, towns and counties, there is this movement because anti-animal agriculture activists have really kind of shifted their motion to doing more at the local level. They haven't been able to get I think they haven't been able to get as much traction as they want using national campaigns. So now it's a little bit more behind the scenes, and it's working with local towns and counties on different kind of anti-agriculture policy. And membership, just always supporting the doers. There's a number of organizations that support agriculture. Don't be afraid to be members. Support the doers always. And lastly, this progress over perfection. Don't be afraid to speak up. You're not going to say anything that's wrong. Constant repetition is our friend. And we have to do a better job at leading the discussion over and over and over again. I put this in as an example. I know many of you are not from Wisconsin, but just so everyone thinks about it in this way, if not you, then who? When I go to the Capitol and lobby on ag issues, when I'm helping farmers, this is my competition. And this isn't even a comprehensive list, but every state, I guarantee you, has this list of people who are working against agriculture today. For a number of different reasons, whether they believe in the animal welfare side of it, that they don't think that modern agriculture does a great job, whether it has to do with sustainability, whether it has to do with environmental issues that they perceive. But I guarantee you that your state, wherever you are, has this same list that is long. And lastly, the most important thing for us to get across to everyone is really, we do hold the solutions and the answers. And the science, as we all know, is on our side on these issues. It's making sure that we're getting the message out, that we're leading the discussion, that we're part of the discussion and the decisions that are getting made, because we have the best success story to tell, and our farmers are leading the way. It's just making sure that we're helping get that message out as well. So with that, I'm not sure how much time we have. If there are time for questions, I'm happy to stay on. I have my contact information on here. If I can ever help any of you in any way, don't hesitate to give me a call, send me an email. We are all in this together, in this kind of same fight and battle. Are there any questions?
Kim,
Yes.
your EASE acronym, the engage part, is that being won or lost, in your opinion, from the pro agriculture side?
So I'm always a glass half full person for anyone who knows me, but I really do think that it is being won. I think that, at least from a farmer standpoint, I think that we're getting much better at not getting instantly defensive. Now, can we always improve? Yes, absolutely. But I think at least from the farm side of it, farmers are understanding that they have to connect better with consumers. And probably, at least from a dairy side, where that started to shift the most, I think occurred as there's been less competition for everyone's milk. It wasn't that long ago. If you were a dairy farmer, you had at least 5 people in your driveway a month wanting to compare milk slips, wanting to pick up your milk. And we just don't have that anymore. And I think farmers are consciously aware of that they need to be the leaders in connecting with consumers. They want to be the farm that the processor wants to pull their truck into or let their semi into. So I think I'm optimistic. I think that we're winning. Now, do we still always have a ways to go? Absolutely. It's continual improvements all the way around. And on that note, it's probably really important too to not get caught up with the loud minority. I think that frustrates a lot of us in agriculture because it's really easy to get caught up with the loud vocal minority, but you have to remember that they're the minority. The majority of people still fall into what we call the movable middles, that they're just trying to figure it out. They want to know what the truth is. You know, they want to make the right purchasing decision. They want to do what's right for the health of their families and for the environment. So the majority of people are very reasonable and reachable. So don't get discouraged by that loud vocal minority. It's kind of like now, like just, shutting the news off. Same story.
A follow-up question real quickly. The efficiency numbers that you had on cattle, where did you get those? From one of those references?
Yes, actually, those are all Jude Cappers, and I probably, for this group, I could have put those in the slides so you actually had the link. But so Jude Capper, and they were published. And if you send me an email, I can send you the studies. But if you look for it, it's Jude Capper's work, and it was published in Journal of Animal Science and the Journal of Dairy Science. I don't know if I have the exact year, but I can get that too. But that's where it all came from.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Kim, I think one of the obstacles that I have, or the fear of talking to people about this, is having some of the information that you're very comfortable with. Like, for example, you talked about, Mother Nature moves genes too, and you gave very good examples, right? And so it's really practical. You talked, so a number, I'm trying to think of the petunia story, right? And how that's not scary. And I know you've gained those through all of your experience and work and preparation, but how would you recommend that how could we get that information? I know you got a lot of sources, but is there a single source that at least gives us a head start on some of that? So we have some of that information and we can go and say, well, by the way,
Oh, that's a good question, Dave. No, I don't think that there is a single source, unfortunately. And you're right. I probably take that for granted that that's just things that I've learned, over time or spending time at the Danforth Plant Pathology Center. But I would say, not to get too intimidated by it. If there is a specific question, just don't ever be afraid to ask or go to that source page. But again, when we're talking about GMOs, it's just it's simplifying it as much as possible, which I understand is exceptionally hard for this group, right? You're scientifically based, you're very research based. It's all about peer reviewed science, and I understand that. But it's taking just little snippets and giving it to people. So whether you tell the petunia story is fine. Maybe what you remember out of it is, well, it's precise plant breeding. It's 1 to 3 genes, and those things can all be found at GMO Answers or even the Danforth Plant Pathology Center. But I think just always trying to work in, when we're framing the story, the why. Because really, especially from our standpoint in allied industry and research, we're trying to protect the use of science. in technology and how we grow and raise food, you know, because people have this romanticized vision of what they believe agriculture should look like. And there is no one way, one size fits all way to farm. And sometimes that's the message that I use. So I know it's hard because everyone wants this specific list or this to memorize or this to cite. But to be honest, it comes with just practice and just practicing conversations with people, and you gain knowledge as you talk to them more. And at the end of it all, the most important part, which is even more important than sharing anything with them, is acknowledging them. And you may not even have an answer to a question that they have, and that's okay. Sorry, I can't give you a more
Darn it.
answer than that.
Harder.
But we have to just do it,
Right.
and not be scared of it, because
Right.
remember, the story of agriculture is on our side.
True.
The success of it is unparalleled. So it's just about making sure you have confidence in that.
Sounds like sales.
It is. It's what we're all doing. We're selling the story too. It's completely true. Any other questions? Well, thank you for the opportunity today. I appreciated it. And again, if questions come up or anyone needs help with anything, please call or email me anytime.